couple of weeks ago, I interviewed a political analyst and commentator par excellence who said to me that the West's view of China is completely skewed. And that got me thinking and it got me curious. And in this video, we're going to be finding out about China, what the mainstream media doesn't tell us.
Take the first step towards online privacy. Get NordVPN.
I invested £25,000. Today, that investment is worth £5 million.
Say hello to our hero, the Hydrogen Energy Release Optimizer. Limitless power, zero emissions.
Hi, this is Crypto Rich, working with you to get rich with crypto, filling our pockets with crypto profits. And this video is not about crypto, it's about politics and economics. And either way, please subscribe, follow me on Twitter, CryptoRichYT, join my official Telegram announcements channel, and please subscribe to me on bit.ly/CryptoRichOdyssey. I post more stuff there than I do on YouTube. It's just an email sign up, completely free. And then you can follow me on Odyssey and get notifications. Now, I am with Alex Krainer again, and I'm also with Rita. And I'll leave it to you, the viewer, to guess which one is which. But I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves. So, Rita, the real Rita, do you want to start?
Sure. Thanks for the great introduction. Well, my name is Rita Gimenez. I'm a political scientist specialized in Chinese politics by Fudan University in Shanghai. I have a living experience in China of almost 10 years because I did my secondary school there, and then I went back to do my master's. And well, I would really like to share my view on China and how mainstream media is also skewed, in my opinion. But yeah, right now I'm a policy consultant for tech-based companies here in Barcelona at the 19N team. So great to be here.
And why you're here, really, a political scientist steeped in China. That's what we want. Okay, Alex?
So I'm a former hedge fund manager and author, blogger, political commentator, historical commentator, economics commentator. And I don't comment very much about cryptocurrencies, but generally, monetary policy, history, geopolitics, and things like this. And I've only recently started to become interested in China. Well, when I say recently, a couple of years.
Okay, great. And this is now the third time, Alex, you've been on my channel. Thank you so much. By the way, I got to say that
it's a pleasure.
The last time you were on with Alexander Mercouris and Tom Luongo, oh my God, the comments that I got were just superlative. And fingers crossed, we should be doing another one of those very soon. So people should subscribe, comment, and like, and all of that. Okay. All right. So I'm going to kick this off because when you came on first time, Alex, you said to me that people in the West have no idea of what it's like in China. There's just a lot of propaganda. And I started thinking, have I been propagandized? Now, I'm Muslim. I was born in Pakistan, brought up in Britain. And I know when when Muslims were all the rage in 2011, everybody was talking about Muslims. They were all over the place, right? And I know that was all nonsense because it was painting a billion people with a particular brush in order to justify wars and a particular foreign and domestic policy. So when you said what you said, it got me thinking that have I fallen for the same propaganda with regards to China? But because I'm not Chinese, because I don't have experience of living in China, I can't tell. Anything? Do you want to start that off and then?
Yes, sure. I think that Rita will probably have a much better input for us. But what I would say is that I've never been to China, so I don't know China, but I do know Western propaganda, which I've known for 30 years. I was, as I may have mentioned, I participated in the war in the Balkans in the early 1990s, and I knew that what was happening on the ground and what was being reported in the news, particularly in the West, was two different worlds. So I understood then the problem of propaganda, and it's planted a seed of doubt in my mind. And so when it started with the Muslims 20 years ago, I thought, okay, I have to learn about Islam. And of course, they were lying to us from cover to cover, from start to finish. And then when they started demonizing Vladimir Putin and Russia, I thought like, okay, this is another hatchet job, and I got very interested in what was going on in Russia and who was Vladimir Putin and so forth. And then I published a book about it, and it promptly got banned. So, that was also part of the propaganda and censorship. Because obviously I must have hit the raw nerves in some way that, they didn't explain, but I can guess what it was. And then, the hysteria gradually building up about China, again, triggered the alarm bell for me. And what I did then is, well, first of all, I don't believe anything that they say in the media. And second, I looked up a few people, Westerners who, write in French and in English and who live in China, because I wanted to get the sense of what China is from them. And, following them and reading their posts, I realized that, again, we're being lied to, and China is not at all what we are being brainwashed to believe. And so, that's how I started, let's say, looking into the role of China in the modern geopolitical drama. And I haven't gotten around to writing much about it, but it's on the to-do list.
There are like many things on the to-do list.
Always.
That's why we all have to-do lists, right? And never gets done. Okay. All right. Well, I mean, both of you feel free to talk directly and ask questions to each other and stuff. So, Rita, do you want to say like how you maybe start off with how China is portrayed and how it's removed from what actually goes on, how it is propaganda?
No, forgive me, Rich. Just a small interruption. If Rita could maybe give us like a 30-second or a minute, how she got to know China, how she just so we know where she's speaking from. Forgive me.
Of course.
No, not at all. Thank you.
Yeah, that can be useful for our audience as well. Well, my experience with China started in 1998 when I went there with my parents, and I was 7 years old. Well, I was 99 actually, but it was my first time as a tourist. So I came back a couple of years later. I'm very privileged because my mom had the chance to work with Chinese people and Chinese companies, and she was invited by one of the provincial leaders in Liaoning province in the northeast of China. And she was there invited. She always tells me that she didn't take a plane and went there just to visit China, but she went with Chinese people and starting to know the country from the actual local people from there, which is something that is a cue for everyone to, start knowing a country, especially a place that is so far and it's so culturally different from ours in the West. And then because of certain elements in our lives, we decided to try and start to live there in 2004. And that's when I started my first year secondary school. So it was a great time to transition. And I always tell people that my cultural shock was never when I went there, but when I came back 7 years later. Yeah, it might sound amazing, but the thing is that there I felt welcome. I felt included. I felt like I was like people there were curious to know about me and my background. But when I came back here and people started asking me about China, they already had an opinion in their minds. There was already some cues and some background knowledge or knowledge in air quotes that they thought, oh, China is this big bad actor, this big bad country that just wants to censor their citizens and wants to control everyone. And if it expands, then we will all be under the control of the Chinese government and the CCP, right? Of course, that was a very big shock for me because it had been my home for 7 years, and the relationships that I had with the people there were amazing, and I've always thought and felt included, but also the people that I've talked to, and I've met a lot of Chinese people in my life from China and that are living overseas. And one of the basic things that are really tricky here is that they are open-minded and they are critical thinkers. So how is it? So my mind is always thinking, how is it that a controlled population of 1.4 billions of people are controlled by their government, and they're also critical thinkers, right? How isn't that a contradiction itself? So I started well, I have always curious with by politics and political science and analysis more than political science as just like a big concept. So I decided, well, now that I've had the chance to do my degree in Barcelona, and that also my degree didn't have any Asian thinkers in the bibliography or any African thinkers. So everything that was not Western, from a Western perspective, was not even taught. And that's a big issue right now in the West, in my opinion, at least. So let's specialize in Chinese politics, and let's try, from my perspective, that I already had an experience there, and I also learned the language, to see if I could go there and understand. Why do we, from the West, see China as this terrible country or this terrible government, right? Because it's always, mainstream media talk about China, but they refer to the Chinese government and the Communist Party specifically. But we don't learn about Confucius thought. We don't understand their values. We don't have any information about their geography, their history, what the Western powers have done in China and the horrible conflicts that have arisen because of that, and what are the consequences of all the action, the Western action there. So from that perspective, living there for 7 years and coming back, doing my degree, knowing that here we don't even think about like Asia or Africa or anything that has, well, Latin America in this sense, because even in the Spanish, from the Spanish political point of view or the Spanish analysis point of view, we learn about Latin America, but from the Spanish perspective, right? So from the colonial perspective, and how the relations with Latin American countries are based on those colonial relations without really reviewing those relations, if I'm making sense. So yeah, Chinese, I went to my master's, and my surprise was that we started our master's learning Western thought and Western analysis tools in Fudan University, which is one of the best universities in China, and it's a public university with all of what it entails. So my master thesis was reviewed by the Communist Party, and I wrote about independence movements in Catalonia, and I've been graduated. So there are certain elements that don't make sense and that contradict what is being said in mainstream media. And yeah, so why do universities in China teach about Western thought and Asian thought, but we don't do that here? But we are the first to criticize everything that comes from this type of like countries that what they want is to have more power in the international realm or the international sphere, so that the international power is more divided and is more inclusive, and the global South is finally heard.
Very interesting. Very interesting. And I can see parallels in what you're saying in Pakistan. So in Pakistan, the news has a much more international bent than the news that I get in Britain, which is predominantly about Britain and Europe and a bit about the US. And then I think the question that you asked, like, why are the Chinese interested in Western and Eastern thought, whereas in the West, we're just taught Western thought? And I think it has something to do with Europe's imperial legacy. Europeans, the imperialists, they know what's best for the rest of us, and that the rest of the world doesn't really have any philosophies or any sort of polity that's worth anything. They're going to tell us what to do and how to live our lives because, well,
Rich, I think that to be fair, you have to acknowledge that Europe is the garden and everywhere else is a jungle. So what is there?
Civilization, right?
That's right. That's a really good point. And they did bring us Christianity. They did bring us Christianity to civilize us, where they could, and now they're going to give us climate change, so that because they're the custodians of the earth. No development for us in the global South.
I will also add European and US imperialism.
Yes. Well, they're just cousins.
Let's not leave them out of this.
Yeah, the Anglo-European axis. Okay. All right. Now, Alex, do you have a question? Or do you want to, Rita? Do you want to say something, or go on to some of the specifics of how the stereotypes or the propaganda shows up?
Well, I would first start off by saying we need to learn. We need to first dissociate ourselves from, and when I say we, I mean Europeans and Westerns in general, because I at least partially identify with the European identity and as a Catalan mainly, and with all the problems that entailed as well. Because when there was a coverage of the Catalan independence movement, there was a lot of harm being done also in international media. But anyways, that's not the hot topic right now. So first, there's a need for education. I think propaganda is based on the lack of education and the lack of point of views and critical point of views. And I'm not sure if I want to focus so much on the problem, because the problem I think is very obvious, and Alex and I have already said, when you read an article, I would advise the audience, when you read an article on any issue, but especially an issue that is not close geographically or culturally, be aware to have lenses that, like cautious lenses, just to say, is the person that is writing this, what is their background? How much do they know? Like how many times have they been to the place that they're analyzing, or how much of a relationship they have with locals? What are the sources that they use? Something funny about some international media that I read about is they usually use big, really bad and negative adjectives all the time when they refer to something that has happened in China or has been done by the Chinese government. But journalism is not about defining, right? It's about explaining and analyzing. So why are you defining something? Why are you just having to add this adjective to your analysis?
Yep.
Be more scientific. So to the audience, I would say judge the analysis and be critical. But to the journalists out there, I would say beware of sources. Try to get as much closer to the local sources as possible, and be critical. But use perspectives that are the people's own perspective and the original people's perspective, which is, I don't think is that hard. English is already a language that can be used very normally almost everywhere in the world. So we can communicate, we can understand each other. Not understanding each other culturally is different, but I believe it's not a great obstacle. It cannot be used as an excuse to create propaganda from the West. And It's also, I think you found, probably you both have found this, but it's funny how propaganda is usually only referred to from when Chinese or when Russians or when communist or left-wing governments use it, but when it's Europeans or Americans, propaganda is just journalism, right?
Yes. No, I get that. Russians and Chinese and North Koreans, they're propagandized. Not us in Europe. We were never lied to about Russiagate or anything. They were telling us the truth. There was no propaganda there or anything else. Alex?
Well, yes, look, I agree with everything that Rita said, and I think that the fact of her having lived experience of China, I think, is invaluable, because it's exactly as she said. What we need is education. And so, if a European who understands, Europe and its traditions and its norms can provide a first-person experience of having lived with China, of having studied there, of having been judged by the, Communist Party in her master's degree, I think that's invaluable, and I think that a lot more people should hear that, because in our media, when they talk about China, they will almost invariably say blah blah blah, the Chinese communists. Like they always put in this, the Chinese communist or CCP, which immediately kind of invokes something dark and evil. And I think what we also need to do is we need to. Sorry.
Sorry, Alex.
No, so what we also need to do is we need education about ourselves, because it's not, Rita mentioned it's not just European empires and colonizers, it's also the American. But, it's not in the people. European people are as good and as bad as the Chinese people. It's that our nations have been hosts to a system which generated empires and colonialism, in Spain, Belgium, France, Britain, Portugal. And we need to understand where that comes from and what that is. And, I try to, it's not necessarily an easy explanation, but it always emanates from our banking systems and the nature of currencies, which are, based on fractional reserve banking. It incentivizes certain behaviors that turn into very aggressive plunder of anywhere in the world that they can get to and to control. And since this is always very unsavory business, there's always need to control the media and the academia and the narrative and the culture. So, we always had, along with the empires, we had the equivalents of today's, Fauci's and all these scientists who, basically contrive moral and theoretical framework for why this is good. And then, you get to learn that everybody else in the world is a jungle, that everybody's uncivilized, and, that we are, maybe we're plundering them, but we're also civilizing the savages, because otherwise their lives would be nasty, brutish, and short, right? And now that we've civilized them, then they get to be like us. But this is all false, and it's a facade. Western civilization has destroyed 6 native civilizations around the world, and literally thousands of minor cultures and civilizations and tribes and nations around the world. And again, it's not because we are necessarily bad people individually. We are just the same as everybody else. It's that we have allowed this system to take root in our nations. And today, it's in the United States. It's in all the European countries.
Okay.
And it's wreaking havoc in the same way that it always has. It's just that today it's geopolitics. In the past, it was history. But what's going on today in the conflict against China is the same as 100 years ago, and the war against Russia today is the same kind of geopolitics that we had over the last 2 centuries. So until we can understand and transcend this system, we're always going to be falling into these pitfalls of thinking that everybody else is a jungle, thinking that we have the right to plunder their resources and bring employment to all these third world countries, which basically means enslaving their populations as a cheap labor force. And so I think that education is the main way that we can go past this dark period of history.
And just on that, I think where it begins is first me being willing to question what I know. That maybe what I know isn't how it really, really is. And then ongoingly. So I got it that, Muslims were propagandized, Russians propagandized. That's really clear to me. Europeans, Americans, Canadians propagandized. North Koreans, yes. And Chinese, yes. But not questioning how I'm being propagandized about China and about North Korea and stuff. So where would somebody go? Because we can't rely on the mainstream media on how they're portraying China.
There are outlets, and it's easy. And one of the things that Alex made me think about was how people-to-people exchanges are very important as well, besides education. And it's something that the Chinese government, for example, is very clear about, because their perspective is more, they know that they've lost the battle on the international media sense, but they want relations, so they focus on trade relations, but also people-to-people exchanges and cultural relations. But of course, big block is the language and how difficult it is to learn the language. A beautiful language, by the way. So everyone who is a bit excited about it, I do encourage everyone to learn it. You'll know more about Chinese culture also through language and customs. But you can go to, for example, sometimes when I write articles, and I've been asked to write some, not many, because obviously my point of view is not accepted so much by the great by the powers. so it's hard to create a name for yourself when you don't repeat the messages that are being repeated all the time here. But slowly, I don't know, I found people also change with time, and when they trust in your work and your opinion, they tend to trust more about what you say that they cannot really grasp, but they do listen at least. So I would say first, go to DAO Insights. It's a website that is full of interesting insights, literally from China, and it's about culture, but it's also about trade, and it's about trends there, because society works differently also in China. So trends and the modernization process might be different. So it's nice to have this comparison, and I think DAO Insights does it very well as a main portal. But then I would encourage also those who are a bit more curious about politics to check out the State Council's, so the Chinese State Council's website. It's a direct source of politics and policy that's developed in China, and it's actually in English. They have a website in English, and they write. So all the information that is available on the State Council's website in Chinese is also available in English, and they've worked really hard to have that. But I don't think a lot of people from the West really tap on those sort of information, unluckily, or we'll see if it starts happening more and more in the future. Because really, I mean, I understand how our foundation, our cultural thought is shaped in the West in a way that we are the center of the world, and we are the ones who will help the world develop and make the earth a very happy place. But we can travel now. We can have so much access to information. There's so many different sources that can be tapped on, that can be contrasted. So why are we still here? That's a big question that I ask myself repeatedly. Like, how can young people? I mean, of course, maybe the age difference with people who are 60 or 70 now, and they've lived through many difficulties in Europe. But young people, 20-year-olds, what happened? Like, why? Like, you've done exchanges, and I'm talking like a lot of people here in a privileged level, economically privileged level, to travel and to visit very different places to where they're born, right? So why is it so difficult to speak to people who are different from us?
Rita, just on young people, right? So what you said, and if you give me the links, I'll post them in the description below. Tao Insights
Definitely.
And the State Council website for China. I just want to I haven't told you this, and Alex knows part of this, right? My children never went to school. They were home educated. And when my son was 12, he turned around and he said to us, I want to learn Mandarin.
Nice.
Right. Okay, why? He said, China's a growing economic power and more people speak Mandarin than any other language. I think it would be useful. We have no idea where he got this from. So my wife, in the small city that we live in England, she managed to find a native language Mandarin tutor. And for like 4 or 5 years, my son went to weekly Mandarin class because he wanted to. I have no idea what he was talking about, right? But that just encapsulates the spirit of youth. And I don't know if he's ever going to go and to China or not, but I wish him the best. I want to move this on, and I'm going to ask some dumb questions. Okay. And probably if people ask me the equivalent dumb questions about the Muslim world or Pakistan, I would be mortally offended, right? So these are really, really dumb questions. Okay, so forgive me. But what about the Chinese social credit system? What about the videos we saw during COVID of people collapsing in the street? What about the what's happening with the Uyghurs and the concentration camps of the Uyghurs, and what they're doing to Muslims there? And all the riots and the protests and the strikes that are happening throughout China. Is that all propaganda?
Do you want to go first, Alex? I feel like I'm speaking a lot, but I can also go into it because Taiwan, and what about Hong Kong?
Oh,
And what about,
I don't buy for a second that China wants to conquer Taiwan and stuff. That I get. That's just the US and the West stoking war. So,
but yeah, so these are the main hot topics that usually people get defensive on because of China. If you start talking well about China, then what about this and what about all the things that I see every day? And
you're a CCC puppet, and so's Alex.
Yeah. I can't really be lied to so much, right? I see videos. How much can in the end it's like everything. It's very hard to identify fake news right now, and it will get even harder. So maybe some videos are true, maybe some videos are out of context. Most of the videos that I've seen, negative videos, are out of context. And
Rita, a question, please. When you lived in China, did you feel less free than in Europe? And did you feel ill at ease because you were being followed or controlled or anything of the sort?
No. Like my answer to everything is a big no. And I've used a VPN in China, and I've been on Facebook. I actually created my Facebook and Twitter accounts in China in the early 2000s in school, in my school's library. No, not at all. I've actually felt more violented by the police here in Barcelona than in China. Of course, I have to say, so that we don't get a load of comments hating on us, is that of course I understand, and I know that I'm a white person and I am not a Chinese citizen, so the perspective is different. But in the end, the law and the control of the government does not only affect would not only affect Chinese people, it would affect everyone that lives in China. So no, I've never felt unsafe. My mom always tells this anecdote about me that in China, I've never had any issue of getting into a taxi at night. Like I've been going out, so like there's clubs, there's nightlife in China, very, very interesting nightlife. I've never had a problem getting on a cab in China, but I've always been quite scared when I was a teenager of getting into a taxi in Barcelona. And Barcelona is not an unsafe city. It was just my perception. So I feel like I don't like being watched by a camera. Of course, I don't think anyone does. But I believe also that I've felt very, very safe always in China, and not because of cameras, because of the people and how they've made me feel, and about how they don't judge you directly. And I feel like in the West, we tend to judge very, very, very quickly. So yeah, no, I haven't felt like that. Also, the yogurt thing, it's quite tricky because it's a conflict that has very different elements, like cultural elements, geographical elements. It's one of the issues that I haven't been there. I haven't seen anything. I've seen what the Chinese media says about the camps and about the schools and about the arguments they use to base their actions there, which in Chinese terms is not as concentration camps to kill and to wipe ethnicities out of of the earth, because also it's quite contradictory that the Chinese government would act so heavily on the Uyghurs, but they have 54 other ethnicities or ethnic groups in China, and they really coexist peacefully, and they actually are one of like the 55 groups. They're in different geographical areas, and they have their own policies to protect their customs, and they've maintained their ethnicities and their backgrounds and their own values throughout the 70 years that the CCP has been in charge. So these elements just make me question what is really going on. I really would want to visit the Xinjiang area and see. Hopefully, I will get a permit one of the following times I go to China. We'll see. I'll let you know.
Please do, please do. Alex?
Well, I think brilliant. This is again, I've never been to China, but I've asked a number of, like I have a few friends, acquaintances whom I've asked, and everybody replies like Rita. Like they don't feel less free there. They don't feel ill at ease. They don't feel followed and spied on. And so, clearly the impression that we are given in the West is biased deliberately. They're deliberately inducing an irrational fear of China, which is completely unjustified, because even if you thought that there was this repressive system existing in China, when in history did the Chinese go around the world and conquer people and put them in chains and enslave them? When did that ever happen, and to who? It just didn't. Like, we're just making a boogeyman out of China for no good reason. And I think that for us who have independent voices and independent opinions, I think it's extremely important to speak out. And then, like, even on the subject of repression in general, just today on Zero Hedge, there was an article about the CIA producing a 2-minute video, a propaganda video aimed at the Russian people. So it's like a 2-minute video that kind of pushes all these emotional buttons of dignity and patriotism, blah, 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 encouraging Russian people to spy for the CIA, and the video ends with, like, contact us, the CIA. Okay, so it's a country of 146, 150 million people, and I'm sure that you can find enough disaffected people who, for whatever reason, might actually contact the CIA and have something to say. And, like, they could create tremendous damage, because, like, even if you, let's say, if you disclosed the identities of their, ballistic missile scientists or, aeronautical scientists, that would be extremely valuable for the CIA. So if you are Russian security apparatus, you have to take that seriously. So you have to control who might contact the CIA to, disclose information. So the repression that we find in many countries is not because necessarily all these regimes are repressive because they're evil, but because they really are worried about the West undermining them. So, like, you have to keep an eye on that. You have no choice.
Or even, if I may, Alex, because of challenges within. And I'm thinking of what's happening in Pakistan currently. That the increasing repression there.
Exactly. That's one of the story where it goes the distance. And so you wanna nip that in the bud. So, when somebody is aggressively trying to undermine and destabilize your country, and to find people within your country who might be there, who might offer themselves as your assets, you have to respond to that. You can't just let it fester and, be like not having a fire brigade in your town.
Yeah,
definitely. And I believe, really, like, an example came to mind while you were explaining, Alex. It's that I remember when the COVID policy was protested by Chinese people a couple of months ago. I think it was in December. Of course, they had been maintaining that policy for almost 3 years, and a lot of people had been under lockdown for a long time and under very difficult circumstances. And one can agree or disagree with the policy, but there was a lot of a big noise around, wow, there's protests, the Chinese government is being accounted for by the people, which is first a big contradiction from what they say normally, that protests are banned and people cannot express themselves. Oh, Chinese people can express themselves very, very well. They have many, many channels for participating in their politics. But besides that, it was interesting because when the Chinese government decided to lift the lockdown measures 2 days after the protests, I mean, I've never seen this in Spain, that a protest has an effect so directly on governmental action. That's something maybe we've seen it, but rare. And no international articles on how that was the effect. So the protests had an effect on government action. And I mean, the government really listens to its people, and the people trust their government. That's something that we don't understand in Europe and in the West. We distrust the government. And we usually are brought up with an idea of you pay the government taxes, but they usually make your life more difficult because of bureaucracy, or because they increase taxes, or because many reasons. But it's interesting, right? And obviously some could say, oh yes, but the opinion polls that are published by the Chinese are not true, because, you know, I mean, if one takes that path, you will always find excuses not to learn more about what's really going on.
Yeah. Well, there is only, I think the three of us can agree, there is only virtue in the West. There is no virtue anywhere else in Africa, South America, China, India, Japan. Well, maybe no, Japan's okay because it's very Western, right?
Yeah.
But only in the West. They're the goodies. Everyone else is the baddies. I think we'll all. By the way, if you're watching, I've got my tongue in cheek. Okay, if any Americans are watching, I'm being ironic. All right.
No, but okay. I to be fair, I think that we've learned a lot in the last, I don't know how many years, but we've seen the global war on terror for over 20 years now. We've seen the imperial wars, destroy Libya, Syria, Afghanistan, Yemen.
Pakistan,
I think that, yeah, I believe that it's not the same. You know, if you listen to politicians, if you listen to people who are high in the centers of power, whether it be politics or academia or corporate world or banking world, they all speak in a certain way, and the politicians and the official, the corporate media. But the undercurrent of people who are paying attention is it's swelling, it's growing, and more and more people are paying attention, and more people are realize that we're being lied to on a colossal scale. Practically everything that matters, they lie to us about it. And
that's our only hope, I think.
I'm sorry?
That's our only hope.
Yes, but I think that ultimately truth always prevails. It doesn't, the part of why many of us tend to feel frustrated is because once we become aware of something, then we get very frustrated with other people who are not aware of it. But if you look at how the world changes, you see that there's a trend in the very good direction. And I love the example of Joe Rogan versus CNN, right?
Yep.
So 10 years ago, Joe Rogan was not a household name. Most people have never heard of him. And today, he has a extremely successful podcast that averages 11 million viewers per podcast. And when he has something more interesting, it goes to 50, 60 million viewers. And then you have the most trusted name in news, which cannot crack 1 million views on their best show, which is CNN, right? So CNN has all the funding in the world, all the all the talent that they can want and want to recruit and so forth. And Joe Rogan is basically put together a podcast out of his own pocket with like a couple of $1,000s worth of equipment, and he's destroying them. Yeah, please.
Alex, sorry, I'm going to have to stop you, right? Because I know Rita's got a hard stop, and I do appreciate what you're saying, right? There is a growing awakening and awareness and decentralization.
Yeah. Just quickly, the point that I was wanting to make is this didn't happen overnight. It took a long time. It took years, but it is happening, and it's a process. That's all.
Thank you.
Definitely. and we cannot get frustrated. I know we need to have patience in ourselves, in our communities, and as I always say, try to have positive impacts every day.
Very good.
As even if they're very, very small.
Yeah. Now, Rita,
because that's the point. Yeah.
Rita, I'm conscious that you have an appointment, right? I don't want to make you late. Where can people find you if they want to follow you? You said you got a Twitter account?
Yeah, but I'm not really active on Twitter. I still need to know how to manage conversations and opinions without letting everything blow up.
Okay.
But LinkedIn is my most active social network, and I also share articles and opinions and probably like DAO insights as well. So I can also share the
give
link.
me those links. Really, really appreciate it. And then Alex, we know we're gonna find you on Substack and Twitter. I'll have those links, and then we're gonna see you again very soon, Alex. And Rita, maybe we'll see you again. You're always welcome back. And thank you very, very much. If you have any comments or questions, put them in the description below. And between now and when I see you next, please keep filling your pockets with freedom, awareness, and the great awakening. It's Crypto Rich and Crypto Rita and Crypto Alex signing out. All the best. Bye-bye.